Startups begin in communities across the country.
Why does Silicon Valley get so much credit? My name is Nick Kastner.
And I'm Kaitlyn Clays. We're interviewing the people building startup communities across America.
But in the areas no one is talking about, the middle.
This is the Ecosystem Builder Podcast by mug.news. Frank and Kim Spillers are the owners of Rural Community Solutions based in Atlantic, Iowa. They are also the hosts of a TV live stream that features entrepreneurs that work hard to support their startup community, in addition to instructing communities on how to support their entrepreneurs in business development. Frank and Kim, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's a little bit of role reversal since I was on your show not too long ago.
That's okay. Paybacks, right?
That's right. We had so much fun having you on, Kaitlyn. We're so excited and we're grateful to be asked to be back on your podcast.
And we're hope that your weather has kind of ironed out a little bit too.
Yes. For people who didn't know, Texas had a ice winter storm and power was out. So that was actually one of the struggles when I was on Kim and Frank's show. So yeah, thank you very much for the warm wishes. It's definitely much warmer here now.
Good. That's a good thing since it's like almost April.
Yes, here's hoping that it stays that way.
Exactly.
Right.
So jumping into my first question is, how did you both become involved in your startup community?
I'm going to roll with this because he won't be as humble. He will be more humble. I just want to take a proud wife moment and just talk about Frank's history. His entire career has been in economic development, focusing on rural America, small communities, local, state, federal level. He worked for USDA Rural Development for Iowa for 6 years. And he's been promoting this startup community and this entrepreneurship as a solid community development technique long before it was cool and the latest tool in the box. So I just have to give a shout out to Frank. I am really proud of him. He has done this all of his life. He has walked his talk, practiced what he preaches. And so it's just, he's been on the leading bloody edge for this. It has been a struggle to get people to recognize entrepreneurship as the core, the foundation of Main Street America, especially for rural communities. Used to be that manufacturing was the thing, and that, we'll talk about that later on, but, that this whole idea of entrepreneurship has absolutely been Frank's cornerstone of how rural communities can survive, thrive, and grow all of his 30-plus career. So I just have to give a shout out to my wonderful husband because he has led the way.
That's so sweet of you to, it's so interesting to hear all about this as well.
Well, thanks. It's true. I don't, I'm not saying that to be the nice wife. It's just that I have watched this man for 20 some years live what he preaches. And we know from all of our work in rural America that this is exactly what rural America needs, is to get back to our roots, get back to our foundation, and just run with entrepreneurship and focus on who we have and who we can have.
Absolutely. So then what's a little bit of your story? How you became all involved in business, in the business realm?
Me or Frank?
You.
Me. Well, by the power of the ring. I'm just going to go there. I have literally lived in rural America. Well, you've lived in rural America in different places. But I've been in this community far longer than he has. I've always been involved in this town. I was born and raised in Des Moines, which is the capital of Iowa. And but first marriage brought me here to Atlantic. And I love small towns. I have no desire to ever live in a city again. I can access it whenever I want it or need it, but I don't have to put up with it.
Very nice. And I also came from a small town. So there's definitely that charm, the rush of having to get through all that hard traffic during rush hour. It's just not necessarily as pressured in small towns. So there's definitely a really nice appreciation that I also have for small towns as well. So then how do you support your startup community, or how do you advise communities support-wise?
Well, we have in Rural Community Solutions, we've got 4 pillars that we really hope that communities embrace. It's really a 4-pillar process, actually. It's relationships, engagement, entrepreneurship, and collaboration. And in relationships, it's all about how do you welcome people? How do you embrace them? The words that you use and the attitudes that you go with? I mean, a lot of times in a town, we'll walk down the street or somebody will walk down the street and they'll ask a new person. Well, there's two ways you can ask a new person. One is, why did you move here? And the other one is, why did you move here? On there, it's just the attitude that your community creates if you are going to build a relationship with a person. The other one is engagement, and that is creating that atmosphere and the environment to where people can talk about the values that they hold, about those issues. And when you take relationships and you build that engagement factor, and engagement is also listening, really listening to how a person became who they became. That is listening to their family culture, their culture, and putting that all together. But if you take the relationship and the engagement factor, you start to build trust. And if we're going to build entrepreneurial environments, if we're going to build an entrepreneurial economy within a community, you need trust, because entrepreneurs are not going to trust just anybody, but they will trust people they have a relationship with, and they will trust people that understands where they came from and why they came from. So it's those four pillars that really build an entrepreneurial economy that helps support communities. And those four pillars, I didn't just kind of pull out of the air. That's from like 35 years worth of experience of working in rural America.
So then if someone were to start a business in your community or any community, because you've advised multiple, what would you say is the first thing that they should do?
Wow, that's really a good question.
It is a good question.
What they should do. Really, they need to check their passion. Are they in the right business? Did they pick the right business to be in? Because if you're not passionate about what you do as an entrepreneur, then it's just a job. And I think the lure of entrepreneurship, the understanding of what an entrepreneur is they have a passion for what they do. They found a need, and then they devised a system to help meet that need, and then they monetize it. But if you can't get up in the morning and do what you love to do, if you can't get up in the morning and understand you're going to fail, and you're not going to be that overnight success, that the successful people that we see right now are 25, 30 years on down the road with trying to build their business, and all of a sudden they're an overnight success, then you're not passionate about that, then you have some issues with that of sustainability and being persistent on really building that up. So that's the first thing that I would really talk to an entrepreneur about is have you chosen the right field to get into if you're going to be an entrepreneur?
Depending on where they are located, here in rural America, there's really research, I think, that needs to be done. How many other businesses? Rural America tends to be far smaller, even though across the country it's like 60 million people. You know, if you go to our individual pockets, our county is only about 13,500 people in our county. And so it seems practical, having had a couple of business experiences here, that doing research that you stand a shot at being successul. Doing your own research, not necessarily taking someone else's opinion about it for granted. So that would be a place I'd start. Passion, absolutely. But really, really checking into whether or not your idea or service is truly needed, or look at what's missing or what will be absent soon. Here in our county, there are businesses people who are going to be retiring. We are going to be losing services in the next 5 to 10 years. And the business owners aren't interested in training people in how to go about, keeping those businesses and services alive for people. So there are opportunities in rural America. So for people who are looking at second careers, or for youth who are looking for an opportunity to stay in their community, but they're not sure what to do, just walk around your town, see the age of the owners, see what you might think that being a shoe cobbler is the super cool thing to do. And how can you learn to do that? Because that service is going to be needed. HVAC people, electricians, plumbers, all of those services are needed in every single community. So, there are lots of trades that for people who, aren't book folks, the school isn't their thing, but to take a shorter course program and become proficient and get maybe an associate's degree or some sort of a certification, those are really valuable, and you can make really good livings in rural America.
You make a very good point of there's no role that's small. Everyone contributes. And you make a very great point. That was something back in Wisconsin when I was a college student. There was a massive program that was like really highlighted for trade students, apprenticeships, really driving home the point that you need everyone. And it's the same with theater. There's no small role acting wise, because you all contribute to a greater system and a greater ecosystem as well. So I think it's very fascinating that you touched on that, and definitely observing your surroundings. And I feel like that's great advice. So thank you for that. And then my other question is, what's one thing people don't know about your ecosystem in Atlantic?
First of all, Atlantic doesn't, the town we live in does not have an ecosystem.
Yeah, I would have to concur.
It's really, in fact, I would say across our state, the ecosystem is really spotty on there. That, there's some states that really do a good job with how to support entrepreneurs and have embraced entrepreneurship as an economic development tool. And then there's other states that really haven't on that. And I think the states that haven't are really coming late to the game on there, but not to say they shouldn't come on that. And really that if you're going to build an ecosystem, this is just my opinion of my experience. If you're going to build an ecosystem, you first have to build a startup culture and build that startup culture with the entrepreneurs in place right now, and build those 4 pillars, because your ecosystem will support entrepreneurs. But if your community doesn't support entrepreneurs and you have an entrepreneurial economy, there's nothing for the ecosystem to do on that. And so they can identify entrepreneurs, but those entrepreneurs really aren't going to last unless they're supported. And so that's kind of like the chicken and the egg thing. But my chicken and the egg is you need the startup culture first, and then the ecosystem can help support that.
A couple thoughts occur to me. Is that one is that a little historical perspective might be useful. In rural America, you may remember from when you were growing up that rural America has tended to be pretty siloed. So, the school did this, and Main Street did this, and the church groups did this. And we didn't really cross-pollinate unless we needed people to volunteer to get something done. That wasn't an ecosystem at all, because it was very independent. And so, like Frank said, kind of coming late to the game is this whole idea like, holy cow, we really do need to, work together. We really do need to network. We really do need to recognize that we're interdependent. We can't exist without each other, because every role matters, just like what you just said. So the tradition has been in rural America that manufacturing, has always been big after World War II. We needed to really get production of all kinds of things underway. And so for competition to take place, communities would steal manufacturing businesses from another community because they wanted to have that 100, 200, 300, 400 job score that they could bring that business to town and say, oh, look what we did. But as Frank has long held, that's just too expensive for rural communities to do. So that's one of the things, is that changing from that mindset, that older, used to work that way mindset, to recognizing that the ecosystem is the better long-term sustainable platform to use. That is going to take people literally to die off. It's before that really takes hold, so that we get that culture shift that Frank was talking about. The other thing that's kind of a challenge about the ecosystem, Kaitlyn, is that with the pandemic experience of people shopping online because it was safer to do, that's going to be a bigger challenge for rural America, because people have now had a year of seeing the convenience. And though we can have, we can pick up our groceries locally at one of the stores, but not the other store, there are just some things that rural America is going to really have to intentionally put in place to be able to capture those dollars and that spending, so that the ecosystem can grow in new ways.
Absolutely. And you guys are touching on a great thing of just relationship building. Frank, you had talked about the importance of relationships. You also have talked about the observation period, and also the Main Street. I definitely related to that. Main Street was Main Street. The school was the school. But I do have strong memories of when people would come together. It would be very great, like a summer festival, or, the pool would be half price or something like that. But I think you're absolutely right, is what can we do to keep that sustainable? Other than just the one festival that happens in the summer, what can we do to create those relationships and keep them going? Kim, you talked about how the pandemic has offered these people an experience of the convenience. I was wondering, what are both of your thoughts on ways to increase ruralness to come back, rather than just completely moving forward and only doing more of that virtual keeping to themselves? Do you have any thoughts, or how that might change post-pandemic?
One thing, we can't go back to where we were. Our show today was actually, the future ain't what it used to be. The future ain't what it used to be. On that, if that's the Yogi Berra saying. But if you look backwards and you take your experience, but we have to create a new future, and that new future is huge opportunity. And if communities need to think entrepreneurial, they need to. We teach communities, think like an entrepreneur, because if you're going to attract an entrepreneur, you have to think like them, because far too many times an entrepreneur will move to your community, and we all know how entrepreneurs think. I mean, some of the thoughts will come out, and we'll just look at them like you're crazy, or I won't, but some people will. But that's the way they think. They think creatively. They think in new, different ways. They think of, how can we do it? Not, we can never do that. And so that's the way communities have to start thinking, is how can we transform to where we need to be? And that is to create that new future, create that new opportunity for us, and to embrace entrepreneurship, because really COVID has given rural America a new life, a new opportunity. And as every entrepreneur knows, you grasp that opportunity. And the rural communities that are thinking like an entrepreneur are going to grasp upon this, because we're going to have, I have seen statistics that 50% of our workforce will not be going back into their offices. And so we can, and this is why there is such an emphasis on how do we build a broadband network that's going to support everybody in the United States. And that's going to take a Herculean effort, much like we did back when we electrified this country. And the electrification of this country, we need to do the broadbandification of this country now, and really build upon that technology, because that will level the playing field. And then people choose where they want to live not find a job and then move there. They will choose where they want to live, and they will work, live, and play within that community. And that's so important to a rural community as an entrepreneur, because entrepreneurs invest in the community and the place they live, because they want to make it the best place for their family. If it's a strong community, they'll have a strong business, no matter if they do business all globally but if you're not happy in the community that you're in, you don't have a strong business. You're looking for something else. You're looking for that support. And so that's why as we can level the playing field and people are going to, choose where they want to live, whether it's an entrepreneur or whether it's just an intrapreneur that is going to telecommute, they're going to have that community of place. And that's what rural America that's going to be their sustainability piece. And I think I got way, way far away from your question there.
I think you had some great key points. Kim, you were going to say something?
Oh, I was just going to say that in a real practical sense, another way that Frank has been on the leading edge of change during the pandemic is that last April, he found an article from Main Street America, which is a national organization. They sent out a survey because businesses were shut down. And so one of the eye-popping survey pieces that came out of that is that of the people who responded to the survey, which was a significant number, statistical number, there were about 64% of America's businesses across the country who did not have an online presence. So when the country got shut down, they had no way to sell their goods or services. So what Frank did was jumped right on that and put together a group called the Hometown Online Solutions Team, HOST. And so HOST has roughly 10 specialists from around the country, and they can help people find money to get a digital presence, to create a website. People who can literally get a website underway, who can help figure out how to word the website, who can do promotional materials, who can do us, who does the community culture piece of it. So there are about 10 of us who are part of this group. A presentation is free to anybody who wants it, that we can help a community figure out but two things. One, God forbid we'll be shut down again. Now with the vaccinations, that hopefully is going to be a much happier long-term forecast for the country and the world. But that also, if something would happen or they wanted to go on vacation or something like that, entrepreneurs, a lot of them, especially Main Street people, are tied to their business. They literally don't have much opportunity to leave or to go to meetings or to volunteer because they're running their business. So having an online presence gives you a side income where, people could be shopping overnight at 2 a.m. And you would maybe be able to make some money that way. So there are entrepreneurs who do that all over the world while they're sleeping. They're making big bucks. So that's another leading piece that Frank has put in place, is this group of people. And so, gosh, just, let us know if anybody wants to tap into the host group, because we're happy to connect all those dots.
That is a wonderful opportunity. Like you both said, is that the pandemic offers opportunity. And that's something I didn't really consider. We talk about how the struggles and how we're helping each other, but this just goes above and beyond to help those businesses. Again, I think back to some of my favorite, there's 2 restaurants, just 2, and that's it in the whole town. But both of them are fantastic and they're supported by the community. And I think the pandemic, at least in my experience, has almost brought people together. I've spoken to multiple people and they're like, oh, we religiously go to a couple different restaurants to make sure that we can give them our support. And I think that's a great way you can give back to the community and build a little bit of a relationship in that sense. And, I'm just you guys had some great points. And so I was thinking back to also people are able to work from home. And that is an incredible statistic that 50% are not going to be going back to an office and will continue to work from home to an extent. And I think that is a great opportunity for people to stay in their hometown if they really desire to be in that smaller area, less traffic, less chaos. Essentially, because the Rochester Mayo Clinic, that's the closest town to us, and so people would commute, and so but they loved Stewartville. They loved to be home, but that commute is kind of like exciting to have to no longer do that if you don't want to. So, you had some great points. So thanks so much for like giving us your like observations too for that.
Well, and just in terms of services and such, telehealth is going to be, for rural America, telehealth is going to be an enormous component because transportation issues exist everywhere for, older people primarily who, lost their license or choose not to drive or physically can't, things like that. So broadband just has lots of implications and applications for rural communities as well.
So my next question for you guys is talking about rural, we're talking about their smaller communities. A question I have is relating to grants and getting finances or loans. What are your thoughts? Like, could you explain a little bit more since they are smaller communities? Are there offers like that?
There are, and there's pockets of it. Like USDA Rural Development has a program to where they will grant communities or organizations some revolving loan funds. And so that organization then will put into place revolving loans funds. So they will share with the bank. They'll be second in line with the bank. It isn't free money for the entrepreneur because there's no such thing as free money for an entrepreneur. I'm just going to get that right out there. And nor should an entrepreneur expect that, because you've got to, if there's anything free out there, you don't value it. It's just like if you're an entrepreneur and you're going to give your services for free, people aren't going to value that. So you have to go into the mindset of, if you are going into business, you go into business. I mean, you act like a business person. I mean, that's just how a business person needs to loan money. They need to find capital. They need to build on that. And rural communities are pretty inventive with how they do that. They will have some dollars available. Sometimes the banks, though, are a little bit more conservative in their lending practices, but they are getting better. And the SBA is a great partner with that. We've got some ideas that communities can do in regards to getting the philanthropic organization going, having a community foundation, because your community foundation can do a lot of different things and keep money local than, say, a lender can do. And they can build that program to where that revolving loan fund can come in and stay within the community. And so some of our ideas are really build that community foundation up and build those relationships with your wealth building farmers, with your wealth building entrepreneurs, people that have already made a good living within that community that want to give back to the community in some. And so then creating that philanthropic atmosphere and environment on there to where business startups do have a pool of money that can be there. It's local money, and there can be you can make any rules that you want. I mean, in other words, that if it's a local business starting up there, they have to locate on Main Street. They have to locate within that community where the funds come from and build their environment there. So there's a whole bunch. Be inventive with that. It's just not government grants. It's just not bank loans, but it is a combination of how can you utilize the entrepreneurial environment within your community to help fund and capitalize those businesses.
Well, and then another way that people have made quite popular is just, GoFundMe things. Crowdsourcing, is another way that businesses have gotten some startup capital. And just, you get people who think, oh, gosh, that's a great idea. And away they go. So that is another, I guess, avenue that has availed itself with the internet that that we didn't have before.
So then, speaking of like promoting, connecting, being involved in your community, I was wondering if you have any recommendations of, for example, co-working spaces in your area, whether that's like a coffee shop or I was wondering, like, is there anything kind of similar to that in your area?
Yeah, they'll coffee shops. Of course, we have coffee shops here, and it's really interesting with co-working spaces. So, I mean, that's kind of the new in rural America. That's a new buzz thing. How do we create a co-working space? And then if we build it, they will come. And I'm not quite sure if that's the case. That you don't build an entrepreneurial environment, you don't build that ecosystem just by building a co-working space and having them come there. It really takes that effort of, are we having the relationship? Do we have the entrepreneurs? Do they trust us? And do they need that space? Not everybody needs that space. We, about 7 or 8 years ago in this town where we live in, we got some entrepreneurs together and we said, okay, every Thursday morning, we're going to meet down at the coffee shop. Just bring your laptop. We'll just network because we all work from home. We just need that. And so we tried that for maybe 3 or 4 months. It was okay for a while. And then, work happens and people didn't show up and it just kind of fizzled out after that. So it all depends upon the environment. Now, we had on our show, and we're going to send you this guy's name because he's just incredible. But he's building a digital nomad environment in Portugal and on the island of Madeira, Portugal. And he's building this environment to where he's using the tourism industry to help attract what they call digital nomads. In other words, people just picking up and going for 3 months to a place that that has the environment, that is supporting entrepreneurs. But he worked with the tourism industry to help monetize that to where the tourism industry wouldn't take advantage of the digital entrepreneurs coming in. They kind of put caps on of raising the rates of how you can stay, where you can stay, but worked with the restaurants and they create networking opportunities on an evening basis in different restaurants and move them around. Mm-hmm. But they do have a co-working space because those digital nomads come in and they need that space to utilize. So if you are if you have a travel industry in your community, co-working spaces do work. Internet cafes do work, specifically in the rural areas. But to build a co-working space for your local entrepreneurs, I'm not quite sure if that's the best use of resources at that point in time.
Fair enough. So then where are some places that entrepreneurs go to learn about startup events? Or do you recommend, is there places on the internet where they can find sort of things?
Oh, Million Cups. Million Cups. Yeah. I mean, that's really great. If you find it.
Do you recognize that name, Kaitlyn?
Yes, there have been a couple ecosystem builders on the show that, so I love hearing reoccurring themes. It's so great but yes, like give me your experience working with them.
Well, Million Cups is great because it's a great networking opportunity. I think even Zoom opportunities, you can find networking opportunities. So I think networking opportunities for entrepreneurs of how they can learn are more available because of COVID these days than they were prior to, because it's easier to access those. Like Million Cups are in the larger communities. There's nothing like that, not a networking opportunity in the small region even within that. So in our area, it'd be in Omaha or it would be in Des Moines or down in Kansas City, of course, where Kaufman is and Million Cups was created. But given that, finding those networking events online through Zoom. But that's where it takes who we call a spark plug, a community spark plug, that spark plug in your community that knows about these events, that knows how to refer an entrepreneur to some of these events that can help support them. So we like to build that environment and then find those spark plugs. So it is like you're building that ecosystem, but you find that spark plug that is a generalist that can help support entrepreneurs one-on-one and support that entrepreneur by saying, we know what you're going through. We know where you've been. We're supportive of you. It's kind of a coaching aspect of it. We're going to try and get you all together, but here's some networking events that we might know of to Zoom, and then start connecting them up. And we call them spark plugs in that local community. And I think that's the important part of how do you create those spark plugs that will support them, that can direct the entrepreneur to those networking opportunities.
Right. So then my other question is are there any notable startups that you've worked with, startups or entrepreneurs?
I saw that question and I started thinking about it, that as a startup, yes and no. Probably the most notable entrepreneur that I have ever worked with was Jim Cabela from Cabela's Outdoor Stores. They're located in Sidney, Nebraska, but way back in my career, when Cabela's was on the upswing and really starting to grow, Cabela's had a story, and this is a really important story for communities to hear, because the Cabela brothers started tying fishing flies in their basement in a town called Chapel, Nebraska. Chapel is a town of maybe 600 to 900 people that is in western Nebraska. Cabela brothers tied these fishing flies, and of course, with anything, it's just like a recipe that you're making in your kitchen. People around them, their friends, their neighbors said, "Boy, you guys are really good. You should start selling these." And so they did. They put an ad in an outdoor magazine, and they said, "Fishing flies, $2 shipping and handling free." And they didn't do anything. They didn't sell it. So they turned that around and they said, no, I got that backwards. Let me start it. Fishing flies, free, shipping and handling, $2. Okay, and so they didn't sell it because the value of it was not there. You were paying for shipping, but you weren't paying for the product. So they turned that around. They said the product was $2, the shipping was free, and the rest is history. They just took off. And so they outgrew their basement, they outgrew their garage, and they went to their city council. They went to their town fathers and they said, "Look, we need some help. We're growing really fast. We're a local business here. We need some help. Can you help us get into a building?" And the city fathers looked at them and they go, nobody helped us get into a building. Why should we help you in business? We had to bootstrap it. Why shouldn't you have to bootstrap it? And they didn't help them. Well, of course, being a city council meeting, that made the paper. So some people, a group of guy, basically a spark plug in Sidney, Nebraska, which is 26 miles away from Chapel, Nebraska, came over to the Cabela business and said, "Look, we've got some buildings in Sidney we would like to show you. Come on over." So they did. And that was the first stealing of a business from one community to the other, really, that the Cabelas left their hometown because they're, the prophet, you're never a prophet in your own hometown. That environment did not see value in helping entrepreneurs. And so they moved 26 miles to Sidney, Nebraska, where their world headquarters is now, or was, built. They have a huge presence on the interstate. If everybody, you're going from North Platte, Nebraska down to Denver, you will go by Sidney, Nebraska, and you'll see Cabela's down there. But that's the first entrepreneurial story that really touched my heart, that said, you as a community need to value people's creativity and values people opportunity, because you're going to miss what I call the Cabela moment. And Chapel, Nebraska had that Cabela moment because both Sidney and Chapel were about the same population. And now Sidney since then, kind of relied on Cabela's to build their economy as a one entrepreneurial town, didn't create the philosophy, didn't capitalize upon that. And then as the story goes, about 3 or 4 years ago, Bass Pro bought Cabela's and now has moved Cabela's out of Sidney down to Bass Pro, where their headquarters are. And Sidney is kind of left floundering at this point in time. So that story is still being written on there, but it is, how do you support that? So that's my story of maybe the famous entrepreneurs that I knew, that I worked with, of what can happen and how it can build a community, but also what can happen if, one, you don't recognize the opportunity, and two, you don't capitalize and keep the momentum going, keep that environment going.
Well, I think that exactly what you said, that it needs to be the culture. It needs to be spread across everybody. So I guess, though it's not any notable names, anybody who owns a business has so much courage and grit and determination and drive. It is so risky to be an entrepreneur, to try and forge your own path, make your own way. So I'd like to just kind of lift up all entrepreneurs, because they may not be household names, but they help keep the backbone of their communities going. And so that makes them notable, in my opinion.
That is a very good, moral of the story. There's so many morals in that one. I really appreciate you taking the time to spend on that. I had no idea with Cabela's. I've definitely gone there. I love Cabela's. I just had no idea of that story. And so,
isn't that great?
It's crazy. It is great. And I think that, I bet the town has maybe learned its lesson a little bit. Maybe give a chance to upcoming people who, approach.
They'll learn their lesson if they're an entrepreneurial community, because entrepreneurs learn from failure. They learn from past mistakes. They learn from those things. If you're not an entrepreneurial community, you will, one, hold a grudge because you lost a business and they moved out of there. They weren't loyal to you. It's the business's fault. And they won't look at their own responsibility and their own actions that they've taken.
And another piece of that, which is why we specialize in working with culture, Kaitlyn, in a community, is that in rural America, people tend to trust and support more people whose grandparents are buried in the cemetery. And for people who are outsiders, who see value and opportunity moving into a community, transplanting themselves or their family or their business where they choose to live. People who historically have lived in the community need to be more open to supporting those businesses, even if they don't have a name that's been recognized for the last 150 years in the area. Because the way we are now is that if we don't feel like we are welcome in a community and our business is mobile, guess what's going to happen? We're just going to upend and move our business and move our family. And so that kind of lesson about Chapel is really critically important. What didn't used to be so easy to move and, change your business location, but holy cow, it's a piece of cake now.
So you'd mentioned, Kim, about culture and cultivating a good culture. So I was wondering, do you have any tips or advice on how to include diversity in your ecosystem in addition to anyone else trying to develop what they can? Or is it situational?
Well, maybe we should start with, what do you call diversity?
I would say in my opinion, like, so racial diversity, ethnic diversity, financial diversity, I guess, like, I know these are very situational things as well. So I wanted to see, have you had any experience in some of these different situations helping other people in their ecosystems?
Absolutely, and specifically in rural America. One, well, there's a couple of things there. One, rural America is not that diverse.
It is financially.
It is
I would say financially,
yeah,
definitely,
yeah.
but racially, not so much.
Like in Iowa, we're 96% white, 94% white on that, and that's pretty cultural of the Midwest. I mean, you know that from Minnesota and of that way, and but it is changing. Specific in some pockets, we specifically in the meat packing industry, you will have a high racial ethnicity within that. And with that, yes, we have worked with different ethnicity and diversity of how do you embrace that culture. And communities have gone a couple of different ways. One, they have embraced the culture and their main street reflects that cultural change with small businesses, because let me tell you, the immigrants are entrepreneurs and they're risk takers and they want to make it, and they will work hard. Their work ethic is phenomenal of that to make that business successful. But the other way is that communities don't embrace that and they try to push down the immigrant and push down that cultural advantage. And their towns then flounder. They're arguing. They're not engaging. There's some conflict there, and so it's really up to the community and to embrace the culture, but also and to transform. Now, that when you embrace somebody else's culture, that doesn't mean you're giving up yours. You're just accepting who they are. And that's part of that engagement factors, is understanding where they came from, understanding why they do the things they do, and then embracing that and helping integrate them into the community. Just like, when I moved to Iowa, I moved from Nebraska. Well, talk about somebody with a different culture and being treated like, I've got this disease because I'm in a rival state. Okay. So, and we can,
that goes back to those silos, those traditional silos.
And we can do this with school closures too, because in rural America, when you have school mergers, school closures, you can be from a town that's just 20 miles away and you move to the town that the school moved to or closed from, and you're treated as an outsider because you're from the competition, you're from that town. And so that type of diversity, that type of culture acceptance is really big in rural America. And if the communities don't understand that and they don't embrace that and they don't address it, then they are on the decline and they won't change.
That is, you really paint a great picture. You paint a great picture of like pointing those things out. I really appreciate you, like, again, explaining more about that. We're getting to the end of the questions, but I wanted to ask you, do you have any news outlets that you recommend? Any podcasts, blogs, resources, whatsoever in your city, or that you recommend at all?
Oh, I'd be really remiss if I didn't recommend our own.
Yes, of course, absolutely. You have covered a ton. We'll make sure to link that in the description as well.
Thank you. Well, we do a daily broadcast. We do at 11:30 a.m. Central Daylight Time. We have a YouTube channel. It's called Rural Community Solutions TV on our YouTube channel. You can go to my Facebook page at Rural Community Solutions or Frank Spiller's Facebook and like the page. And come in on there. You can catch the broadcast. And then also we turn that broadcast into a podcast. at anchor.fm/Frank Spillers. And that is called Think Like an Entrepreneur, Become a Spark Plug. So you can catch us different. Also, there's a podcast, E2, Entrepreneurial Ecosystems, does a monthly podcast with Don Mackey. Don is a partner of ours, and Don is probably the pioneer of ecosystem builders and entrepreneurial system builders. I would highly recommend his podcast also. And I highly recommend MugNews. You and Nick are just incredible ecosystem builders, and just the education that we get out of all those podcasts are just great.
Thank you so much for plugging us. That is so kind of you, and we really appreciate the high praise. And Don Mackey is an incredible person to talk to. We had him on the show, actually, and what a fantastic guy. Definitely thank you for bringing up his podcast. We'll definitely link that as well. And before we close out, do you have any final thoughts or advice for the audience?
I do. Entrepreneurship is the pathway to building our economy back. 98% of our jobs, new jobs created, are built by new business startups and existing businesses within your community. It's not recruiting. So entrepreneurship is really an attitude. It's an attitude of creativity. It's an attitude of, I want to build something. And when we start to accept that culture and we start to build that culture within our communities, then we start to get that entrepreneurial community in there in our entrepreneurial economy. And to create that community, you need to embrace diversity of new people, of just new people. They can look exactly like you, but they might have different ideas. They're new people. You need to listen to your community. You need to embrace and engage a broad group of people and talk to them. Communicate that vision, create that vision of the future you wish to create, and then establish goals to get that vision. But the vision is important. Just like an entrepreneur will vision for the business that they want to grow, what does it look like when they're done? A community needs to do the same thing, to vision of how do we support entrepreneurs. And to craft that vision that will support an entrepreneurial economy. And then you have to make sure all the right policies are in place to support entrepreneurship. And those policies are, look at your zoning ordinances for home-based businesses, look at your sign ordinances to help entrepreneurs become visible, to help entrepreneurs survive within the culture. And you have to look at the culture of your community by what we call pulling back the rug and looking at everything you've swept under the rug for 100 years. You need to pull back that rug and start addressing some of those issues that are keeping you from growing and supporting that entrepreneurial culture. So that's pretty much in a nutshell how we address that. And I'm just really excited about the life and times right now that we're in, because I think entrepreneurship is going to explode across this country, given where we are with the opportunities that we have. But people need to understand, and communities need to be ready for that. Entrepreneurs just aren't going to sprout up. You need to create that environment like you do a seed when you put it into the ground. You need to create that environment, water it, take care of it, nurture it, and then it will grow into an economy that will help support your town.
What he said.
Oh, absolutely. That is very inspirational and ending on an absolutely fantastic high note. I can't wait after this interview to go talk with Nick about the things that we talked about in this interview. So thank you both so much for coming. And I really appreciate your time spending with us at mug.news.
Oh my gosh, we are grateful for the opportunity. Thank you. Please do greet Nick for us. And you guys just take care and be well.
Will do. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Kaitlyn.
Take care.
Thank you.
Now that we've learned about an ecosystem from a person who's building it, I'm going to link back up with Nick to clarify on some jargon and take a deeper dive into this ecosystem.
Okay, Kaitlyn. So normally we start these by asking how were Frank and Kim, but we have both been on Frank and Kim's show, and so I know Frank and Kim are delightful. But how was the conversation?
It was an absolute blast. If you guys don't know much about Frank and Kim, I'll give you, wait, you guys listen to the podcast. That's fine. But yes, again, they have an incredible show. Nick and I have been lucky enough to be on their show, so it feels really great to give back and bring them on to us. So one of my biggest takeaways was that we got to really dive into talking about rural Midwestern towns. So I know this episode, it went a little bit longer than usually, but one of the things that was in my head, the reason I was like, this is great to go a little bit over time, is because I kept thinking, if my small town were to have this information, I think that would be incredible. So I really think that this episode is definitely targeted to rural America. If you aren't sure how to encourage entrepreneurs to come stay in your town, this was incredible to listen to Frank and Kim talk about this.
Yeah, the whole rural America thing, and we talked about this on their show, Kaitlyn, but both of us being from rural America, it is, I guess, inspiring to see people focusing on that as their career and business. Was there anything you had to look up after the fact?
No, not too much to look up. I was pretty familiar with, small towns and small town culture, personality, and no, I didn't have anything to look up so much.
Nice. Well, was there anything else you wanted to touch on?
Yeah, I think what they're doing is an incredible opportunity that they're offering for entrepreneurs. And I guess like almost an advice thing, if I were to give advice to my small town, for example, is definitely be welcoming. Now what did Frank say? He said 50% of America's workforce will not be returning to the office. They will continue to work remotely. And so I guess I just want to, like, a final thought is this is an incredible opportunity for people who love small towns and who commute to a big city. This is a great opportunity for small towns to promote small businesses and entrepreneurs to stay in their community and grow their ecosystem. And that was my final thought. Nick, if you have anything to add on that, otherwise you can go ahead and read us out.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add quick is, especially like the gig economy we live in, there's never been a time like this where small town America can thrive in the way that it can now. If it has high speed internet, if it has the amenities people are looking for, and if the community is welcoming to this kind of, I guess, workforce, a small town can really like be position themselves in a place to succeed moving forward, which is exciting. So rant over. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Ecosystem Builder podcast, which is a product of mug.news and hosted by Kaitlyn Clays and myself, Nick Kastner. If you have any questions about today's episode, connect with us on Twitter at Nick Kastner, at Clays Creates, or at MugNews Official. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review and share with your friends. We release episodes every single Wednesday morning, so make sure to follow so you don't miss a beat.